Hello and welcome to NewsClick. Today we're discussing the recent judgment of the Supreme Court in the Novartis case and its impact on public health policy in India. The Novartis case is important in particular because of its discussion of Section 3D of the Patents Act 1970, which is a provision introduced primarily to protect against the practice of evergreening. To discuss the issue, I am delighted to have with me Dr. Amit Sengupta from the Delhi Science Forum, who's also been associated with the People's Health Movement. Hi Amit, before we get to the judgment and its impact, could you briefly run us through the background to the 2005 amendments to the Patents Act and the need for the introduction of Section 3D and why all these sections were required in the Act?
See, the 2005 amendments were actually required because India signed the TRIPS agreement as part of the broader WTO agreement in 1994. And India used the entire 10-year transition period that was available to developing countries. So, by the end of 2004, we were required to have what was called a TRIPS compliant law, which had to differ from our 1970 Patent Act, because in 1970 Patent Act did not allow product patents on pharmaceutical substances. And that was the significant difference that we had to make in the amended Patent Act. The 2004-5 negotiations that led to final formulation of the Indian Patent Act of 2005 were quite interesting, because initially it started with the government issuing an ordinance in December 2004, which was actually substantially different from the final act that got passed by Parliament. And the reason that there were many what are called health safeguards that were introduced into the 2005 Act was because the left at that time was able to open up again discussions in spite of the ordinance, because of the political circumstances at that point of time. And it was largely because of the insistence of the left in Parliament and a very large mobilization outside Parliament of different political and mass organizations and different groups that led to finally the 2005 Act. So, the principal attempt by a lot of people who tried to put in various amendments into the 2005 Act, which differed from the ordinance in 2004, was to mitigate the impact of a TRIPS compliant regime. It could never be as good for domestic industry and healthcare as the 1970 Act, but the attempt was to put in clauses which would mitigate the impact of providing for pharmaceutical patents.
So, what are the various methods, you refer to them as health safeguards, prescribed in the Act to ensure that India could continue to manufacture and produce low-cost pharmaceuticals?
Well, there are three broad areas of health safeguards that you have or can possibly have in any patent law. One relates to patentability, that is what qualifies for a patent. Now, it is possible in patent laws to have low standards of patentability, which means that a much larger number of products pass through the mesh, and you get
the barrier or the threshold of patent.
Threshold is much lower. What, for example, was done in India was to set the threshold much higher, so that only genuine innovations where the patentee could show that they had actually put in a lot of work, put in a lot of resources to produce something that was genuinely new, only those would qualify for patenting. So, that is the first area. The second is what is called compulsory licensing, which is again a provision that is allowed by the TRIPS agreement, which essentially says that if the patent is being abused in various ways, that the monopoly right is being abused to in order to get high prices, that the subject matter is not available to people, etc., etc. That becomes a ground for other manufacturers, in spite of the patent existing, to be given a license to produce this drug and thereby create competition in the market, and from a monopoly situation create a situation where the prices would come down. The third is, of course, parallel importing, which for India is not such a major issue at the moment, because we produce most or all of the drugs that we require. But in countries with lower sort of facilities and resources for manufacturing, that's again an important health safeguard that has been used.
So, given this context, what is the Novartis decision actually all about, and why do you think it is so important?
See, Novartis has been fighting this case for about 7 years now, and this is the fourth time that in some court of law or some jurisdiction, they have lost the case. They lost the case first in 2006 when the patent office denied them the patent. Then they went to the patent appellate board, where again they lost the case. Then again in the Chennai High Court, and now in the Supreme Court. And each time Novartis has shifted the ground in terms of what they have been arguing, but essentially what Novartis has been trying to do is get a patent for its drug called imatinib, which they sell as Gleevec, which is an important anti-cancer drug used for blood cancer, a kind of blood cancer called or chronic myeloid leukemia. Now, Novartis has been arguing at two levels. One, it has been arguing that their claim for a patent is valid and they should issue a patent. And the second, they have also been in different ways challenging a key section of the Indian Patent Act called Section 3D. Now, this section relates to what we were talking about earlier, that it sets the bar of patentability much higher than in most patent laws. What Section 3D basically says is that if you have a true innovation, you can patent it in India. But if you are just tinkering with a molecule and making minimal changes that can be anticipated by anybody who understands the subject, then you do not qualify for a patent. That's what Section 3D is. And Section 3D has been used at all these steps that Novartis has challenged the decision to say that imatinib cannot be patented in India because it is an old molecule, and that is why its claims fall under the jurisdiction of Section 3D. What they are trying to patent is just a small tinkering with the original molecule. So that's really the case as far as what the Supreme Court opined on.
Why do you think we need provisions like 3D in the Act, given that the Indian government does have alternate mechanisms to deal with the issue of providing pharmaceutical products to the public at low cost, for example, through price control mechanisms?
Well, first is the price control mechanisms in India have ceased to work well in the last 2 decades. We started from a situation in 78 when we had more than 300 drugs under price control. By 1994, only 74 drugs were under price control. We now have a new price control regime that has been notified for over 300 drugs, but the calculations are by which the prices are fixed are of a kind where they actually sanctify the present high prices, because they are based on existing market prices. So that's one part of it. But the other thing is that for patented drugs, it is very difficult for price control alone in the conventional sense to regulate the prices of drugs, because local manufacture usually does not take place. So the drugs are being imported. So even in order to get data regarding what the actual manufacturing cost is very difficult. The second is, if you impose price control, the companies always have the option of directly importing the drugs through the facility that's providing these drugs or directly through doctors. So there are a lot of issues why for patented drugs price control mechanisms are not the best way by which you can actually keep prices down.
Fair enough. Now, what effect do you think that this judgment will have on both the Indian pharmaceutical sector as well as the R&D policies of foreign MNCs?
Well, frankly, this judgment really again reinforces what the Indian law has said for a very long time, since its amendment in 2005. So in that sense, the judgment is not saying anything new or anything different from what the law is. What it is doing is it has in a way staved off the challenge to a key section of the law. Now, what is going to happen now is not really the issue, because nothing new is really going to happen. This law existed since 2005. What might have happened if Novartis had won this case is important, because a lot of patent applications, not just for Gleevec, but a lot of patent applications for, especially for HIV/AIDS drugs and a few anti-cancer drugs, were rejected using Section 3D. Now, those could have been opened up again. A lot of patent applications multinationals did not pursue through because of the existence of 3D, because they thought that they would not qualify because of this. Now, those would again have been open doors. So, there was opened up. So, there was a possibility that if there was a judgment in favor of Novartis, then a slew of cases would have opened up for a number of patents to be granted. So, that is really the danger, and was the danger, and the danger was not just for India. It would have meant that the supply line that Indian pharmaceutical companies provide for a range of countries across the world, especially poor patients in poor countries, that would have got disrupted, especially for HIV/AIDS and cancer medication.
Now, there has been a large campaign instituted by foreign multinational corporations who insist that lowering patent protection will retard innovation and the introduction of newer drugs into countries like India. Is there actually any evidence to show that higher patent protection is beneficial to the populace at large?
Well, there are 3 or 4 issues in this. First of all, the issue of the Indian market does not really make sense, because in value terms, the Indian market is 2% of the global market. So, it is not as if multinational corporations depend on profits that they get from the Indian market in order to plow back into research and development costs. Their basic profits come from the European and the US markets, from the northern markets of the globe. So, that is not an issue at all, first. Second, there is very little evidence today that the patent system per se is the best driver of innovation. In fact, there is a whole body of evidence that is now emerging that in many situations the patent system in fact puts the brakes on innovation rather than promoting it. In fact, you have a much larger number of patents now being issued to prevent others from working in a certain area rather than to protect one's own innovative activity. So, these are called patent thickets. So, you are preventing others to come into that area. The third thing is that conventionally corporations have always inflated what it costs to develop a new drug. Remember that the basic research for drug development in most situations in developed countries, in the United States and Europe, is done in public funded systems, in the universities, in research organizations that get public funding. For example, in the US, it is the NIH which is the major funder, the National Institute of Health, for drug development. What corporations do is they pick up those innovations from public institutions and commercialize them. So, the calculations that big pharma puts before you is actually highly inflated. They claim that it costs anything between 1 billion or more for a new drug. Now, I think the claim is that it's 2 to 3 billion for a new drug. Whereas independent assessments, in fact, there have been some assessments about Gleevec. Gleevec is an interesting case because much of the development was actually done in public research institutions. The then Novartis is a later entity, Ciba-Geigy, which owned the patent, had lost interest in developing the drug, and it was only some of the scientists, including Dr. Dukkar, who's been on record saying this, who were involved in developing this drug, kept working on this for a long time without support from Ciba-Geigy. Now, calculations show that probably developing Gleevec would have cost Novartis and Ciba-Geigy something like between $100 to $300 million. Now, contrast that with more than $1 billion sale that Novartis got in its first year after it was provided with a patent in the United States. So, that is the kind of profits that new drugs make, which have no relation at all with the price of monopoly price of drug that they usually set.
I think that's a crucial point to note. Now, moving on, do you think that the decision by the Supreme Court will actually spur the government on to take greater advantage of TRIPS flexibilities that are, in terms of issuing compulsory licenses or ensuring more stringent application of 3D? I mean, in the recent past, we've seen some more applications go in for compulsory licensing. Do you think there's likely to be more political will to take action on these issues?
Well, that's for the government to decide actually, whether they would want to do that. The key thing is that the government must believe in its own law. Now, if you really look at how the 2005 Patent Act was really pushed through in Parliament, what the government wanted as its law was the 2004 ordinance that they issued, which was very different from the 2005 Act. So, we have a situation where the government is not always very convinced about its own act, unless they change, because you can have the best of things in your law, but that necessarily does not translate into policy unless you apply the law. And unfortunately, in the past say 8 or 9 years since we have had this new act, the government has not always shown the willingness to use valuable tools that exist in the law to ensure access to medicines.
I think an instance of that is the fact that you have only one compulsory license which has been issued.
That's one example of what the government is not doing or should be doing. But also importantly, if you really look at the Novartis case, it was public interest groups who forced the government to fight this case more aggressively. But even from reports that you get from people who are inside the courts, it was not the government which was really fighting this case aggressively against Novartis. So, it was as if it was half-hearted in its attempt to protect its own law, even in the Supreme Court or in earlier jurisdictions. It is a tribute to both the court and to other public interest organizations and, for example, the drug companies, the Indian drug companies who impleaded themselves in the courts, that we got a favorable judgment. So, it is anybody's guess that if it was left only to the government, what kind of a judgment we would have got. I am saying this only to show that at present the government had not telegraphed a clear intention to use all the safeguards present in the law for access to medicines. Now, that's really the challenge. You have the tools today. Is the government going to do it? The government knows best.
Now, moving on to my final question for today, what are the chances of India being made a party to a WTO dispute regarding the higher standards for patenting prescribed under our Act, in particular given the non-discriminatory provisions present in the TRIPS agreement and the interpretation of 3D that has been laid down by the Supreme Court, which essentially states that the section applies primarily to the fields of pharmaceuticals and agri-chemicals?
Well, I don't really think that this is going to the WTO appellate board. The court in its order has made its own judgment in terms of how the parliament really discussed the issue and what was the basis for it. But finally, it's the law that you have, and it's the same law. The court has not changed the law.
The court has changed its interpretation of the law in terms of the provision could be argued. It could be argued that the provision applies equally to all products.
Well, I'm not sure that's really going to make a difference, because the text of the law remains the same. It has not been challenged as yet. In fact, when in 2005, when the 3D became part of the law, there was a lot of speculation that this is one portion of the law that may be challenged, but it was never challenged. In Chennai High Court, one of the things that Novartis wanted, one of its pleas, was that 3D should be struck down because it is at variance with the provisions of TRIPS. And the Chennai High Court at that time had said that domestic courts cannot give an opinion on an international dispute. And if Novartis wants, they can go and approach through the Swiss government, because countries only can go to the court, to the appellate board. But Novartis never went to the appellate board even after that. So I don't think this is something that Novartis or any other northern government is going to do as far as challenging the Indian Act is concerned.
Well, that's all the time we have to discuss this particular issue today. I'd like to thank Amit for joining us, and thank you for watching.
Thank you.